Scott Grayson, Grayson's Grades, 97.3 ESPN.com. He grades the Eagles at the midway point, and he joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Scott, 3-4-1, first place, a game and a half up. Feeling good?
I wouldn't say feeling good, no.
Well, I'll tell you what.
I mean,
After what we saw yesterday, you got a Giants win, so they kind of kept themselves. They got a little bit of momentum. I think Dallas's defense has played a little better. I mean, they're going to have some lighter games on their schedule. I think this thing halfway through the season is as wide open as it was a couple weeks ago.
It certainly is, and that's why I don't think you can take anything for granted. Certainly they have things going their way, and the fact that they're ahead, they didn't play yesterday, and they still gained ground on everybody but the Giants. But, there's just things like, what you've been talking about here, your poll question. Are you in or out on Carson Wentz? I mean, I think Carson Wentz's play is going to be the biggest thing that says whether or not this team wins the division and perhaps even wins a playoff game or packs it up and pretty much just tries to limp to the finish line here and may still win the division anyway, but it'll be an awful season.
Right, so let's start with Carson Wentz because the question, the genesis of the question is essentially you gave him an F. So are you all in or all out after the first half? I think a lot of people were saying I'm out, but 80% are saying I'm in. So you say F, but that was the first half. Do you think that he can improve on that first half play, or is this who he is?
Well, I put it in the grades, the description next to him, and the big question is how Wentz spent his bye week. Did he do some self-scouting? Did he look back at film and say, give me all my interceptions. I want to watch all these again. Did he look at his 32 sacks? Did he see all the things that led to mistakes and negative yardage and turnovers? And, I mean, quite frankly, this team might be good enough to be competitive if he just doesn't turn the ball over. If they take their downs and punt and don't give up short fields. I mean, this defense is starting to go and trend in the right direction. So perhaps they could be good enough if he's just a game manager. I wonder if that's what they're going to try to get him to try to be more of. I don't think that's in his DNA. I don't think he can be that. But the biggest thing he's got to try to do is just like we've been talking about, stop holding the ball so long, stop taking those sacks and that end up leading to some fumbles, stop trying to fit the ball into tight spaces. He is getting some healthy guys back. Rely on the rest of your offense to do their jobs and just do yours. At times, throw it out of bounds. It's okay. Live to fight another down. What he learned in this bye week is going to be interesting to watch and see if he took anything away from his mistakes in the first half to be better in the second half.
If Carson Wentz is a game manager, are you getting the ROI that you want on Wentz?
No, absolutely not. He has to be more than a game manager. But at this point, a game manager kind of gets them to a division title. And I'm not saying that's what he should be because I don't think he can be that. And like I said, that's not who he is. You want Carson Wentz to be more than that. You want him to be what you paid him to be, which is what he was back in 2017 and what he's been at times in the past. But this season, he's been nothing like that. So he's got to find a way to get back to who he was. His mechanics have been off earlier this year. There's just a lot of things going on with him, and I think some of it is between the ears, and he's just got to fix that. If he can fix that and stop trying to duck away from every rush. Stop trying to, you got to pick your spots to be the man. You don't have to be the man all four quarters. Just be the man at times when you really need to be the man and stop trying to be the man in the first quarter. Look what he's done at late games. He has had some good things this year. But he just got to find his time, pick his moments, let the moments come to him, and don't force them. And I think if he can do that, I think ultimately he'll have a good second half of the year.
How much blame should Doug and Press Taylor get in this conversation as well? And you can expand on Doug Peterson's grade also.
Well, you gave Doug a D, and we'll get into why there. To answer your question first, at first I blamed Doug and some of the coaches behind the scenes for what's going on with Carson. But the more that I kind of read between the lines, I'm starting to sway that opinion to the point where I see Doug getting frustrated, almost saying, how many times can I tell him not to hold the ball? I can only tell him so many times to do things before he has to do it. And ultimately, I think that's what falls on Carson. You're in your fifth year in the league now. You don't need somebody to coach you up to tell you not to hold on to the ball By now you should know. And if you don't know at this point in this bye week, you should realize that a lot of those 32 sacks were due to you holding on to the ball too long. So I think there's a lot of what's going on behind the scenes that, that perhaps they've tried to get him to do, and just Carson has been so stubborn. Now, that being said, you could argue that Frank Reich and John DeFilippo were able to get him to do not do these things. So, I think there's a little bit of blame to go around for everybody. Now, as far as Doug Peterson's grade, I said I gave him a D. I just thought, I still criticize him for being so conservative in the Bengals game, which, oddly enough, that tie is working in their favor right now. But at times, I like aggressive Doug more than conservative Doug. But again, like Carson needs to pick his spots, Doug really needs to pick his spots. You need to know what kind of team you have on the field at a given time. 4 of 14 on fourth downs. That's 10 times they didn't convert on fourth down and gave the ball to their opponent with better field position than they would have if they would have punted or perhaps even put points on the board with a field goal. I think Doug's got to be a better game manager in his mind as far as in knowing when to take his chances and when to take his shots, because I think at times he has hurt his team. That being said, though, I will give Doug credit, and I put this in there as well. One of the things he's done well over the last few years is when this team seems like it could easily pack up its bags and go home, it has fought. They've fought throughout all 4 quarters of a game. They've fought through weeks of adversity and found ways to get on top through that. They do control their own destiny. That's a credit, I think, to Doug and his locker room there that he's been able to keep up. So, the question is whether or not they can now take this momentum and actually start cashing it in to kind of put some room between them and the rest of the division, or whether they're going to let this go down to the wire. And I think a lot of that will, fall on Doug Peterson and his coaching ability to have these guys focused and ready to play.
Grayson's grades the first half of the season. You gave Miles Sanders a B, which I think it's interesting because obviously the lack of playing time for him. He has been hurt. He has not been on the field all that much, but when he's played, he's been very good. I think he averages about 6 yards a carry. So, number one, he gets a B. And number two, what does getting him back in the second half do for this offense?
Well, and I think I would relay that more to what it does for Doug. It seems like Doug Peterson is a little better at calling run plays when he has Miles Sanders. I feel like he gets away from the run a little too quickly with guys like Boston Scott, even, Corey Clement. And I'm not saying I necessarily blame him. I feel more comfortable with Miles Sanders out there too. But I think what Sanders is going to do is give this team more balance back. And I think that they're at their best when they're doing that, because then Carson's not chucking it as many times in a game. You also have Miles as a receiver. So if you do want to pass, it goes down in the books as a pass. Fine, Doug, there's a pass. But it's a short pass or it's a route, that gets Sanders out in some space. He's electric. He had a couple of long touchdown runs before he got hurt. He is an electric player. And I said he was on pace to have earned an A grade through the first half of the season, but injuries took him out of that. And like you had mentioned, Mike, and he was having a great year, and he can certainly finish up and still have a great year. 71 carries, 434 yards, and 3 touchdowns through 5 games. That's the kind of production you're going to get back, at least I think you should expect to get back. And I think he's just going to make Doug a better play caller. That's my expectation. And it'll be interesting to see if that comes true. But I think Miles could play a key role in what this team does offensively throughout the second half of the season.
Yeah, because you gave an A to Travis Fulgham. You gave an A to Greg Ward. So you get those 2 guys plus Jalen Reagor, who obviously didn't get enough playing time to really get graded. But it seems that in the second half of the year, Carson is going to have essentially the best group of weapons he's had since, 2017?
Yeah, and you're looking at Alshon Jeffrey. All signs are pointing to he could be back this week. How they use him or what kind of mentality he brings to the table, who knows? But, yeah, I mean, there's certainly going to be no excuses for Carson. There were things he did at times with what you were looking at as a bunch of no-names out there. And then a guy like Travis Fulgham emerges, and he really became a household name for this team this season up to this point. He certainly is going to have some weapons out there. There's no reason for him to kind of say, oh, I had nobody to throw to. No, you're going to have some weapons out there, and now it's a matter of whether or not he can get them the ball and whether he can make the rest of the team play better. That's what a franchise quarterback should do, and that's what you need to see him do. You're also going to be looking at in the second half of the season at some point getting Zach Ertz back. You do have Dallas Goedert, who came back last game. He has his weapons back now. He does, and it's up to him how he uses them. And these guys need to find ways to get open. And when they do, they've got to catch the ball. John Hightower was the one guy receiver who I kind of gave a negative grade to, and just too many deep balls that he had the ability to catch and just didn't come up with. And that's one thing that, Carson likes to throw the deep ball. Keep taking those shots, because Travis Fulgham drew pass interference penalties that were huge. Don't show up in the stat sheet, but those are big penalties to draw. And that's what these guys need to try to do on the outside. Help out Wentz, and and at the same token, Wentz needs to have confidence in these guys to go out there and make the plays for him.
You mentioned Alshon, and yes, there are reports that both Sanders and Jeffrey will be back. What is the best way to utilize, Alshon? Is he just kind of like a reserve? Does he have a role? Where do you see the Eagles being able to fit him? Essentially, it looks like Fulgham took his spot.
Yeah, it does, and I think you could argue that you could look at Alshon being on a pitch count to start as a way that they could argue for him to limit his snaps. At the other token, look, he's a guy you're paying him. Send him out there and let him see what he can do. I think it's been so long since we've seen him at this point that you just want to kick the tires on him and see what he can do, what he can be, how he can potentially help you. Because they do have a couple of games here where, look, they're not as tough opponents as they're going to have the next 4 after that. So they have an opportunity here to kind of kick the tires on a few things and see what they've got. Now, yeah, you could argue that Fulgham has knocked off Jeffrey. I think Fulgham now fits in at Deshaun Jackson's spot. So Alshon's on one side, Fulgham's on the other. You got Jalen Reagor and Greg Ward who can rotate in and out through the slot. And they can all kind of interchange at different spots throughout there as well. I think they've got 4 solid receivers finally. And then you start looking at Hightower. And the guy who, honestly, we've talked about, and we haven't mentioned, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, to me, is kind of like, hey, guys, when am I going to get my turn to play? Because I don't see him fitting in here now for a while, unless somebody else goes down. These other guys have produced, and to me, they should be the ones given the chance to play. But, yeah, it'll be interesting to watch what kind of opportunities and play calls they give to Alshon. I think they'll try to get him involved early because they don't want him starting to talk to Josina Anderson again.
Yeah, it's pretty funny about J-Jaw. I totally forgot all about him during this conversation. Like, oh, yeah, I forgot about him, the second-round draft pick. Pretty crazy. Although when you see DK Metcalf, you remember instantly. How important is Isaac Seumalo and that whole story about him coming back? And I also want to get your thoughts on Mailata being more of a reserve tackle at this point.
Yeah, I said that before. I was down on the fact that they took Mailata out and put Peters back, because to me your future is in developing Mailata at this point. Your future is not in Jason Peters at left tackle at least. The importance of getting Seumalo back, huge. Talk about a security blanket for Jason Kelsey, who has just been Iron Man on that offensive line, and that he has been there throughout this entire season, the only one on that initial starting line to still play all 8 games so far. But getting Seumalo back is huge. Again, you just talk more about, if I'm Carson Wentz and I look at who's blocking for me, I have more confidence in the guys I'm used to seeing up there. And now I can keep my eyes downfield a little longer and not worry too much about the rush. So, all of that is probably going to make Carson a little better. But Seumalo, Kelsey, they're used to working together side by side. That is going to be big to have him back. I, again, would have rather seen Mailata on the left tackle side, but guys, let's be honest, over under how many games until Jason Peters taps out again, and then Mailata's back out there on left tackle anyhow. So we'll see. And the one to watch as well is when Lane Johnson comes back. Will he be back this week? That's another piece on that line that's just solid. So this line is, everything is trending in the right direction in terms of health. And you play that forward to say, okay, well, if they're healthy, then they should be better. They really should run away with this division. But what should happen and what does happen, as we all know, is always the case in the NFL.
Scott Grayson's grades are up at 97.3 ESPN.com. Another guy, Rodney McLeod, you gave him a B. I want to get, the secondary with him and Mills and then Slay and how he's been since he's got over here. It seems that McLeod has kind of, I think, the first couple of years he's been kind of solid but unspectacular. I think this is maybe the best year he's had.
Yeah, and honestly, you look at the last few games he's had, and they've been a lot better than the first few. I think he's just kind of finding his feet under him. Without Malcolm Jenkins there, now it's his job to be the man, and I think he's starting to be the man. He came with a huge play up in the Dallas game to get that touchdown that they badly needed to help put that game away. He's forcing some turnovers after this defense went a few weeks without getting any. It's just been a huge, huge thing for this team, and I think he's providing some energy for them. Being there all in the secondary, he's kind of become the captain back there and really calling the shots and helping things back there. He's also coming up like Malcolm used to do. He's second on the team in tackles right now. So I think you're seeing a lot of good production out of Rodney McLeod. And like I said, he's trending in the right direction, and I think he could certainly move himself up into the A category here in the second half of the season. All
right, Grayson, we got the Giants this week, and then a stretch of games, that 5-game stretch where they really have a they're probably going to be an underdog in all 5. They got that Cleveland, starting with Cleveland, Seattle, Green Bay, the Saints, and Arizona, and then Dallas and Washington to close out the year. How many wins do you see this team getting? All healthy? They're not going to have Deshaun Jackson. They don't have Zach Ertz. They're not going to be 100% healthy, but few are. But coming out of this bye will be about as healthy as they've been the entire season. So how many wins do you see this team ending up with?
Well, I think they have to look at it where they have to win their 3 division games. If they do that, I think they win the division. Everything on top of that's going to be gravy. But I think they can steal a couple of wins away from those games. I agree with you. They're going to be underdogs. I think getting healthy, that they're going to be a team that some teams look past. I think they could beat Cleveland. Arizona looked vulnerable to Miami yesterday. So you start looking at some of these games and thinking maybe you can get a couple more wins. So my answer, I think they could get 5. That would get them to 8 total. And at this point, 8, that's a pretty good season considering where they were.
All right, Scott Grayson's back Monday with a look at the Eagles and the Giants. We'll have Grayson's grades after Eagles-Giants right here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. And don't forget, you can hear Eagles-Giants 1 o'clock here on 97.3 ESPN. All right, Scott, thanks, pal.
All right, thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Yeah, man. Grayson's grade. Get the full list of grades at 97.3ESPN.com.